Right, on this day a year ago, South Africa entered lockdown after the first coronavirus cases were reported. A lot has happened since then. Government has used changing alert levels to manage the rising COVID-19 infections and deaths. While we are currently on level 1, concerns are growing over a third wave ahead of the Easter holidays. Let's now speak to Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who joins us now via video link. Dr. Mkhize, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We've spent a year living with this deadly virus, hearing stories of death, experiencing some of those stories relating to deaths and families, and also South Africans having had to go through grief directly. Let's talk about this journey throughout the entire process as we reflect on a year.
Well, thank you very much. It has been a year, a very painful and difficult year, and a very difficult time for South Africans in general. But I think when we look back, we need to salute all the fellow South Africans for rising to the occasion to face a very difficult period, working together and getting us to a point where we can today say that there's a hope as we move forward. It was most difficult to actually be part of the discussions where we had to agree that there has to be a complete shutdown, no movement of people, no visiting of friends, no traveling between city to city or from a province to province. Basically, no socializing. Literally, that's what it meant, because staying at home meant that was the only way we could actually slow down the spread of the infection. And the purpose of it was what we called was to flatten the curve. And the flattening of the curve meant that we needed to expand our health services, because our models showed us that if the numbers of people rose quickly that needed to be admitted into hospitals, then our hospitals would not cope. Therefore, we'll lose more people if our system did not cope. And that's what we needed to do. It actually helped because, firstly, we were able to expand our health services to create more beds, hospital beds, field hospitals, bring in more oxygen, bring more ventilators, bring in more staff. And in that process, we also went out to screen our communities to be able to determine which areas were high transmission areas, which we called hotspots, and which ones were not. It allowed us space to be able to approach this in a kind of differentiated manner where we realized that the country didn't suffer the infection in the same way, to the same extent, everywhere. But the difficult part was to actually to say to people, there is something wrong about getting out and mixing up with people, as we socially do socially. So because of that, we do want to say that it was a very difficult time, but we are very, appreciative of the fact that South Africans were prepared to now forego the stuff that they normally would enjoy, to people to sit together, enjoy parties, birthday parties, and attend funerals in large numbers, and go to grieve together, with memorial services, go out to sports field and enjoy, watching their favorite football or other, sports teams playing, or going to church and, large church services. All of these things became a kind of difficult area where restrictions were imposed. And we must say that it has been difficult, but the fact that South Africans work together is what has carried us through this whole year.
Minister, you say that, there was something wrong with having to mix socially with people, and that, even though we're on level 1, has pretty much still not changed much. The number of known deaths due to COVID-19 sits at well over 52,000, with a third wave looming, and the Easter long weekend coming up. I know that you've had meetings with the Command Council. What are your plans around that space? Because there are serious fears and concerns around the Easter long weekend.
Well, we haven't taken the decision on the matter, but let me just say that churches have come forward to us to say they have actually not had a proper, environment in which to conduct their normal church services or, whether be it in going to mosque or other religious gatherings, they have raised that issue with a lot of concern. And some of these are once-off events. So they have actually been pleading that we must open up more with many more people being allowed to come to these church services. On the other hand, we have also had comments from members of the Ministerial Advisory Committee who are saying, well, looking at the way the long weekend is likely to pan out, you're likely to see large interprovincial travel, large numbers of people gathering together. We might be creating super spread activities. Now, what government cabinet has to do is to consult with all the provincial leaders, district leaders, and mayors, councillors, as well as civil society and traditional leaders, religious leaders, and try and find what would be the best for South Africa in general. We have to try and create a kind of balance that makes people feel that we are not unnecessarily, unduly infringing on their rights of practicing their religion. But at the same time, we need to be able to understand that we cannot say it's going to be a free for all for people to go out there and create super spread activities. So where do you strike the balance? That's an issue that I think our cabinet has to try and work on, the balance that is needed. Now, we have seen a total lockdown like level 5 that you described at the beginning of this show. That was one of the most difficult situations, and really not the president, not the cabinet, not any South Africans wishes to see us going back to that kind of lockdown. And we really hope we never have to get to that level. And so the level of restrictions has to be tempered with the need for us to ensure that we just reduce the numbers of death or numbers of infection and prevent a rapid spread of infection. Where is the right line that we need to draw? What is the best level of restrictions? What is the necessary restriction that can help everyone? It's not easy ever to take such a decision. So we have to do the consultation, but the principles were underlying that from the Ministerial Advisory Committee and scientists is that super spreader activities arise when many people are in a crowded spaces, poorly ventilated, and without any use of mask or distancing, and therefore they can, if there's one person who's got an infection, can spread that infection relatively quickly within a large number of people. Now we need to show that we have learned from that lessons and how to prevent that. We have to rely as well on South Africans on their own conduct to help us through with that kind of response, so that when we say let's limit the numbers, let's limit the activities, let's limit the traveling, there must be an understanding that we don't wish to go back to that level 5 that lockdown that we actually went in before. Although it was important and useful at the time, but we all agreed that it is not sustainable because of the fact that economic activities are important. People have to go and work. They have to actually ensure they get food security, income security is very, very important. So all of that together has to be put on a balance.
Now, as you try and strike this balance, Minister, I know you're trying to not go into the details of what could possibly happen, throughout the Easter long weekend, but is there a likelihood? I mean, you speak about level 5 restrictions not being something you wish to go back to, but could we see an adjustment, say, to level 2 or 3, just to ensure that there is, of course, we curb these numbers going into the Easter long weekend?
This is one time when whatever we do, you never get it so right that no one complains. Everyone complains, whatever you do. What we can say is that we can never go back to the kind of level 5 lockdown like before. I've seen people circulating fake news to say people must go stop and rush to buy and stock because there's going to be lockdown. We'll never get back to that level 5 like we ever did before. The restrictions have to be always balanced. In the last wave, we actually asked for people not to go to the beaches. Oh, then we're taken to court. People wanted to go to the beach, who's government to stop them from going to the beach, and so on. So we have to always keep the balance. From where we sit, we think it's important to say that a careful balance is going to be important. But I think even before those, people need to understand that there's a long weekend coming. We can't go into large parties. We can't go into situations where we're not using masks, overcrowded. We have to really understand that it's not about government putting a restriction. It's about what kind of behavior will help us to prevent an early surge again, like we have just seen before. So at this point, one is not able to give you a concrete thing to say this is what's going to happen, because there has to be consultation. I know of a few times when a ministerial advisory committee would give us a particular proposal as to what we could do. Then we go through the consultation, and then in consideration of all the points that have been made, we shift and then try and accommodate as much as possible of normal social life, at the same time trying to make sure that it can be done with a degree of protection to our people. Now, most of the countries have been forced to go into lockdowns and do a lot more restrictions, but in some instances, in our case, we have not really gone back to the same level of restriction that we have seen in other countries. We think that we have to continue to learn, working together as South Africans.
Now, the latest data on the vaccine rollout shows that over 220,000 health workers have now received the jab. But there are concerns over the slow pace of the vaccination rollout. And, perhaps give us more detail, Minister, on what's causing the delays and, what is this process going to look like in the next few weeks?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's important that we must always remind South Africans that where we started by saying that we were going to vaccinate 1.5 million people based on the order of the AstraZeneca vaccine that we had said we were going to be receiving in January. And we did receive it in January. And we're all ready for the rollout, and every site was ready to receive the vaccines. And within the time that we were preparing, then, of course, Professor Mahdi came with a report that indicated that AstraZeneca had shown less efficacy than originally anticipated. And that is what really threw the spanner into the wheel, because all of a sudden now we were unable to proceed with AstraZeneca. So as much as there's a concern about the delay, but I think it must first be remembered that we were all on course, everything was on time. Now, the results that we were working on were indicative results that had come out from various studies before, but those studies, by the time we got to the time of the last reports, and we're shocked because it was only South Africa that had the problem. We had reports about the UK that didn't have the problem. So I think we need to remind South Africans about the fact that we were ready, we had procured the vaccines, we were ready to start, but then the report from the study which was done by Professor Mahdi, then all the Ministerial Advisory Committee suggested was that we need to hold that process and do a different study, which we're waiting for them to do. Then we then moved quickly to procure the Johnson & Johnson, which had been shown to have good efficacy. And that process was coming on well, except that most of these, Johnson & Johnson has not started releasing their manufactured batches of the vaccine. They will only start in April for the whole world. So we're not the only ones who are waiting for Johnson & Johnson to come out with their vaccine in April. Now, but the amount that we got, excuse me, the amount that we got has come a bit slowly because it had to be recalled from various countries, and sometimes the bureaucracy of getting them released from various countries and relabeling them is what slowed the process down. Now, on the one side. On the second side is that we anticipated that the Pfizer vaccine would have been also with us now. There's been quite a lot of nebulous negotiating with Pfizer that really has delayed us from being able to receive these vaccines this week or in the next week. So that is where the delay would have come from. But nevertheless, that was because we were wanting to do a bit earlier. The real time where we expect all the vaccines to come is in April. Pfizer has given us revised numbers now that they will be giving us between April and June 5 million vaccines, and that Johnson & Johnson, we've got a signed contract that they're going to give us 2.8 million vaccines. So that gives us almost 8 million vaccines from April to June. That our vaccination sites are being activated now to get ready for that period. So the delay may be a couple of weeks, maybe because of the delay on the Pfizer vaccine, but it will all be coming, and therefore that is really the point that we need to explain, that the real scale-up was going to happen in April to June. But in terms of the original plan as well, we're going to start in February, March, April. So the first phase was going to take us up to April, actually, although we wanted to scale to push it faster. But so we still have not lost the time in terms of that amount, time frame. What tends to be a challenge is that we compare ourselves to many countries, and then when other people have started the vaccine in their different countries, then we also feel we should have been at that level. Of course, we should try and move as fast as possible. But between now and the end of the year, we would have received on schedule. We've got all the vaccines that we will be needing to cover the population that needs to be targeted. We will not announce them until we've got them finalized, but all of it has been negotiated, and all we're waiting just to sign it in the next day or two, and then we'll see how that works out. The agreements tend to be a problem because the lawyers in the global office pick up a point and then hold the process and take you back to renegotiations, and then you must clarify this, you have to go back, rediscuss. Those are the things that tend to take a bit of time. But we want to assure South Africans that April, May, June, we will actually receive a total of 7.8 million vaccines, and that is the last figures that we have got.
Is there a date that's been specifically put out in April for when we'll receive this next batch?
Well, we've ultimately agreed with the manufacturers that they want to get the latest possible, beyond which things won't happen, beyond which things will have happened. And then they say they're working for as early date as possible. So we can just say that, the date, for example, that we have been asking the manufacturers to give is just been to say sometime mid-April. But they're saying that they are pushing as much as possible to get it earlier. So with that, you always get the problem. For a long time, we're just dealing with the first question that they said, we just say quarter two or second quarter. We won't give you specific dates. We just know it will happen in that quarter. It takes a long time to say, they say the manufacturing timelines and the delays and so on. They don't want to be caught out, and therefore we now start calling them out for the delay, because there's a huge global demand. But nevertheless, we are saying that sometime mid-April we should be able to see the vaccines from the normal manufacturing belt of Johnson & Johnson, as well as from Pfizer. We've also been pushing that they must give us as much as possible. Now, with Pfizer, as I said, we could have actually got a little bit earlier, but they've got a number of issues that they keep picking up to say, no, let's resolve this, let's resolve that. So that's really what has been causing the delay in the whole process.
Minister, you've been speaking a great deal about the agreements, the details around agreements being at the center of the delays. Just for clarity, it's been reported that perhaps the delays with the Johnson & Johnson are because of part of an agreement that has not been honored. And as the reports go even further, they speak about how it has a lot to do with a compensation fund that still needs to be set up to allow those who may experience adverse effects from the vaccine, to have some sort of a fallback.
Look, what sometimes complicates issues is that journalists get gossips and then they make them as sources more authoritative than the real position. If I can just say this, on the 23rd of February, we, myself, the Minister of Health and Minister of Finance, signed a joint letter sending it to Johnson & Johnson, telling them that we are agreeing to create the no-fall compensation fund, that we will process that fund and try and put out the regulations on time, and indicated to them that the real fund will require a legislative process, but we'll do an interim arrangement before that time comes. They were satisfied. They felt that our approach is correct, and they actually signed the agreement on the 26th. So Johnson & Johnson, there's no delay about no-fault compensation fund. The other story on the side are just gossip, which you will get in any situation where people are working and are trying to create, an excitement in the discussion. But in reality, Johnson & Johnson, we signed the contract 26th of February. They could not deliver because they are not ready, because they will only start in April. Aspen is delivering, is going to produce the stuff that we're getting. They only started, their run of their processes in March. And then they need to wait for about a month for safety, sterility checks for the vaccines. Then only supply after the end of that month, which is April. Now, the whole world is actually going to get Johnson & Johnson vaccine almost at the same time. So the delay is that their manufacturing schedule only releases the stuff in April. What we got as the South Africa is because we're proactive to go out and say, it's the same vaccine, give us those vaccines that have not been, that were earmarked for the trials, so that we can start our processes. And they were quite, considerate to give us those. So there is no problem with the no-fault compensation fund. However, we are going to be publishing the regulations. There are a number of things that we are exploring internally as how the fund is going to be administered. We've also been proposing that there should be a retired judge, and the Department of Justice has given us a whole list of judges that we could consider, and that in the process we need to actually create a mechanism to do clinical evaluation of the complaint of anyone who reports harm from the vaccine. Must actually give us there must be an evaluation panel of experts who will be able to say, yes, indeed, this would have come from the vaccine, and therefore you are entitled to a complaint. Then there should be a team that must be able to determine what the level of the compensation would be, and that based on the level of harm or damage that would have been caused in the individual. Then the issue is concluded with that compensation. So it's a new fund that we've never had before. So there's nothing that is really well structured to be able to respond to that. So we have to improvise for a while until we can get the proper legislation. We will do that. By the time all of these vaccines come through, people who will get the vaccination will already be covered by that. So there's no problem on that side. I think that we just need to understand that when we say that there are delays on the agreements, the no-fault compensation fund was never an issue. We have just now agreed with the Johnson & Johnson that there's a timeline by which we would have been able to publish the regulations, and that timeline is agreed between us. And once that is done, we will be signing for the second batch of vaccine, not the first one. The first one is done, 11 million complete, done and dusted, and it's already in the bag. It's just a matter of waiting for the delivery time. So when people don't see the vaccines come, they think that someone has made a mistake in the process. But there are deliverables that are tied up to specific logistical issues. And in this case, we still want to assure that Aspen is going to be releasing the vaccines in April, and the whole world will start seeing Johnson & Johnson. In fact, South Africa was the first one to ever use this vaccine directly now as in a process of rolling out vaccines in the world. No one has actually done that. So we're going to be amongst the first ones as well to receive the batches as they come out.
Minister, thank you so much for your time. There we have it, Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize, giving us a sense of where we're standing as, of course, going forward and looking back on a year since we went into a hard lockdown.